Welcome to Sales Talk for CEOs. I'm glad you're here. I'll be interviewing CEOs who have successfully scaled their B2B sales organization. In each episode, I'll start by uncovering the sales background of each CEO, dig into the strategies they use to build their sales organization, and wrap it up with what the future holds. We'll cover the good, the bad, and the ugly of scaling a sales organization. I'm your host, Alice Hyman. Hey, welcome everybody. So glad you're here for Sales Talk for CEOs. I'm just back from vacation, so I'm just got to get my brain in gear here. Excited to have Craig Zingerline on the call today with me to talk with you about how he set up his sales at Growth U. He's a CEO and founder, but he is a 6-time founder, and he's helped dozens of companies scale their growth. So he's been with companies like Sandbox and Votion, and I'll let him tell you the rest. But it's really great to have you here, and I can't wait to tell our audience all about what you are doing at Growth U. Welcome.
Thank you, Alice. I really appreciate you having me on today. And I think, I generally talk a lot about marketing on podcasts, but today I'm absolutely thrilled to be talking about sales because I think it is it's just one of the least understood aspects of growing companies and growing startups. So I'm excited to dig in. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so I got a marketing guy on a sales show. I love that. And I know you were in product before that, so we'll get to that. Yep. But it's exciting to let everybody know what you're doing at your current company because you are really providing a lot of great resources for startups. So tell us about Growth U.
Sure. Yeah. Growth University, our tagline is where startups come to grow. And we offer on-demand training programs for marketing and growth, mostly geared towards CEOs, early teams, and marketers within startups who maybe have questions about how to go to market, how to do channel marketing, how to find customers. What is retention? How do you track LTV and cohorts? So we try to answer all those big questions. But fundamentally, what we're set out to do is decrease the percentage of startups that fail. Something like 92% of startups will fail before they ever reach 5 years. Certainly by the time they get to 10 years, it's just the industry is just littered with failed startups. And so we try to provide the resources that those founders and early startup teams and teams within startups can use to just make better decisions and to grow their startups faster.
Yeah, it's a shame because there are a lot of great products and ideas, services, out there that never make it because these early stage startups don't get all the help that they need, right? I mean, we do have a lot of great incubators and accelerators out there, but there are so many more startups that don't get into those programs than do. So I'm excited that you are providing that for them. Now, specifically, you're not providing help getting their sales going. You're providing help for them to understand their market better and to really move into that market and decide what channels should they have sales people or not. Yeah. What kinds of marketing do they need? Yep. Which social media should they use? What are some of the other things?
Yeah, I mean, we tend to look at things primarily through an experimentation framework, actually. So one of the first things that we'll do when we onboard a new member, who's member and client or customer, I use them interchangeably, but we call them members who subscribe to our platform. When we onboard our members, what we do is we ask them a whole bunch of questions about their business. What stage are you at? What type of industry is it? Is it a consumer startup? Is it a SaaS startup? Is it a marketplace? What are your core metrics? And sometimes they don't know these questions, so we can kind of coach them along the way. Yeah. So we get those inputs. And then what we try to assess is, okay, well, directionally, what are the areas where they're going to need help? And, to your point, we offer marketing and growth programs. We offer channel programs, how to succeed running ads on Facebook, for example, because there's a lot of really bad ways to do it. And there's a couple of ways to do it really well. So we've just seen so many different types of marketing campaigns, and we look at all the channels kind of agnostically, holistically, and we say, okay, well, what experiments should you be running as a startup to go and learn in these different channels so that when you get positive feedback, you can double down, triple down, and start to move into more of a scale mode. Now, oftentimes that includes something around outbound sales, in-person sales, trade shows, conferences. There's often a human element that comes in. So it's not just a pure digital play, especially as we move up market to enterprise SaaS companies. But we kind of look at all of those different inputs and make recommendations based on our library of programs that we've built, what's going to be the best fit. And then often we've got a couple different tiers in terms of how we price our product. So there's a mentorship tier, for example, that will give the founder a little bit more hands-on from our team in terms of coaching and ability to ideally help them save themselves time and or money when they're going to market. So we've got programs kind of across that spectrum in LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Google, in terms of marketing programs. And then we've got programs that are a little bit up a level. So how do you find your initial customers? How do you leverage screener surveys and discovery conversations to close deals, which is kind of like a secret sauce. When done well, it can be really effective. We've got programs on cold emailing, outbound campaigns, inbound campaigns, content strategy. So think of us as like the training platform for all things kind of go to market within a early to growth stage startup.
So you have all this amazing information for these early stage startups. So if you're listening and you are an early stage startup, check out Growth University for sure. But this is interesting. So you've started a lot of companies. You've founded a lot of companies, and you probably noticed at each one of those companies that these needs were there. So take us back, right, to how you got the idea to start this and why you started it, and kind of tell us your story.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, I think it's worth mentioning that I started my career actually as a software engineer. And so I was a web software engineer and I was a web developer. When I was in college, that was my first kind of side hustle, or I guess what became my first agency was building websites and doing what we now call product strategy, but nobody wanted to pay for product strategy back then because everyone was like, what the heck is product strategy? Just build my website. Right. So I started building websites, and then I got pretty good at understanding how to kind of optimize that conversion process from visitor into lead. I mean, this is really in the early days. And so the themes there were building fast loading web pages that had enough content that could educate the potential buyer to a point where likely you'll probably set up a meeting. And so I did that for a little while. And then I went inside of a couple bigger companies and I was a web software engineer. So I kind of cut my teeth understanding how the technology worked behind the scenes. One of the companies was an email marketing company that we had huge clients, and I was sitting there coding what was really a marketing platform that the clients were using to go and use to send their emails and to do their marketing. So from there, I ended up just getting really into the startup ecosystem and the entrepreneurship track, I guess, is
I'm going to pause you there for 1 second before we move on. What I think is so important there is that with what you were doing, because you were product focused, but you ended up doing it through building a website, you learned what converted and what didn't.
Yes.
And that's something that a lot of people don't learn. There's a lot of stuff on websites that don't help us convert at all. As you were talking about earlier, when you and I were chatting before the show, we were saying most websites really are terrible at converting. They're terrible at engaging or piquing curiosity. And so you got that before you moved on to do your next thing. And I think that is key.
It is. And it actually became kind of a focal point of my career. So I knew fairly early that I wasn't going to be the best software engineer. And so, but what I was starting to get pretty good at was the strategic side of building stuff. And so naturally, then I moved into what's now called product management roles. But for the next set of years, I found myself kind of owning the metric side of the business. And so the role might have been a product manager role where I'm kind of working with the engineering team, but also intersecting with marketing with kind of the final accountability in terms of what sales and marketing metrics were and how they were impacting the business. And so I did that for a large number of years, actually, where I was really kind of responsible now, not just for building and seeing kind of how it was done, but also responsible for the metrics. Like my livelihood depended on building things that actually could drive those conversions, because if you're just building stuff that nobody's really reacting to, then why are you building?
What's the point, right?
Exactly. And
but yet people persist in doing it.
But they still do it. And I actually, so, I think overbuilding features is one of the biggest risk factors that I see with startups. But the reason, just to fast forward a little bit, the reason why I built Growth University is based on all of those experiences. And then what I ended up getting into back in 2016 or 2017 was I was starting to do a lot of mentorship for startups. And usually these were conversations with founders. And I didn't really know where I was going with this, but when I was talking to them, I started to put a bunch of puzzle pieces together. And really there were 5 or 6 themes that almost every conversation that I had with a founder, when we started to talk about what their pain points about growing their business were, that were common. And it was relatively simple stuff, but it was very, very consistent. It was, how do you find customers and what channels work? Yeah. How do you convert them? How do you retain them? How do you get them to stick around? How do you understand kind of what metrics and what conversion metrics really matter to the bottom line of your business? It could be pricing strategy, things like that. And then what I ended up moving into was looking at that from an experimentation framework, because I had seen over and over and over again so many founders that would make assumptions on a channel and go and spend a bunch of money on a channel. And then 6 months later, they don't have any deals and they burned a bunch of money and a bunch of time, but they didn't really also look at what else was possible. Building a sales team, doing outbound, hitting trade shows, running Facebook ads instead of Google ads, whatever.
Right. They spend all their money in a channel that isn't working. And they think, well, maybe I just need to spend more money.
I just need to spend more money. And I need to build more products. Doesn't work. It was like, let me build more features to kind of address the needs of that audience. But oftentimes there's a mismatch there. So you're building features that aren't relevant. You're not really getting objective data back because you're just going really deep into a channel that may not be, or a tactic that may not be the best for you. And I saw that over and over and over and over.
Yeah, that's where the experimentation comes in. I think it's so important. And being agile in that, right? It's like, yes. We don't want to go too broad, right? We want to target our audience, and maybe we've got several, but we want to start somewhere. And like you and I talked about earlier, and own that group, right? Own those people who they believe what we believe.
Yeah.
They're our ideal customer.
Yeah.
They buy from us and they stay.
Yeah.
They evangelize for us, right?
Yeah.
Get that solid core and then start to move out, right? But within that, there's experimentation, figuring out how to draw them in.
Exactly.
Right? So talk some more about that.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. When I have a program that I put together that founders use called How Do You Find Your Initial Customers? And even before you know who your ideal customer profile is, there's some ways that you can go and test the market. You can spend a little money on paid ads to get messaging in front of a potential audience or persona. You could do outreach on LinkedIn. You could do cold outreach. You can go talk to people. So assuming you kind of get that figured out, there's usually multiple personas that live within your ideal customer profile. But what I think a lot of founders do is they don't objectively understand who that potential buyer is. They make an assumption. I've been guilty of this too. And you make an assumption on who your buyer is, and you just keep pushing on who that buyer is, but you don't objectively know that that's your buyer, because it's your founder instincts are wrong in that case, or you read some article that told you something that you should go and do, and you just go down this pathway, and 6 months later you realize, oh wow, that actually wasn't who I was going after.
Yeah, and a lot of times with startups too, they're aiming too high, which I do believe in aiming high, but they don't understand where the decision is being made at these companies that are 10 to 100 times larger than them. They might shoot too high. They might think, well, we have to have the CMO in order to make this decision, when in fact the CMO may be peripherally involved, but not necessarily, not figuring out who the other key players are. And so identifying those personas becomes really important. But I think that in this experimentation, they need to be very open and just asking a lot of questions. Like I really tell startups, don't try to sell anything.
Yeah.
Just don't try to sell anything until you've talked to enough people. So if you think that this type of company is going to buy from you and that these are the 3 people who will probably be involved in the decision, then call, make a list of 100 companies and call and just inquire. Don't try to sell anything.
Yeah.
Try to have a chat with people. Now, not everybody's going to accept your call, and I get all that, but that's where you use friends and family and colleagues to make introductions and stuff. And just say, hey, I have some ideas I want to toss by you. Do you have this challenge? How are you solving it now? What does that look like? Tell me more about it, right? And, just explore with the people who can buy your products and services, explore with them, and then get off the phone. Like they may say, oh my gosh, do you have a solution? Is that your solution?
Yeah.
Can we buy it? Great. Then talk to them about it. But otherwise just gather that intel.
Yep.
So, they might say, yeah, well, I would not be involved in that decision, but here's the people who would be, or I would definitely be involved in a decision like that. So they're just going to give you information. So you get your set of questions ready and you just start calling. And when you say you're a startup and someone introduces you to someone, they're going to be happy to talk to you most.
They usually are.
So I really implore everyone to do that.
Yeah.
So tell us, so talk some more about that.
I think that, you just completely nailed that. That is like that's the perfect outline of what you should do, but it's hard. And I think a lot of founders, this is, when I talk about, we make assumptions on our market, we think we know it, but unless you're doing that type of stuff that you just outlined, you really don't. I call it persona problem fit. So I talk a lot about different kind of product market fit, of course, is kind of the gold standard and what happens at that stage. But even does the persona or does your ideal customer profile that you think that you've got a current hypothesis on as being your ideal customer profile, do they actually experience the pain that your solution or your product can deliver on? And oftentimes the answer is no. And I completely agree that having informal, non-salesy, honestly curious conversations with folks, generally when you're a startup, it's usually folks at bigger companies or other startups, and asking questions means that you're both going to learn what those pain points and what that fit may or may not be, but you're also going to be seen as a good player. You're not going to be seen as somebody that's just knocking on doors, the spam messages that you get on LinkedIn every day. I found that, so I've run some experiments with this. Roughly 25% of people that you outreach to completely cold with no intro, roughly 25% of people, if you ask them a question in a cold channel, even on LinkedIn or through email, will actually give you a response if you're actually honestly trying to answer a set of questions. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to all be buyers, but what you're trying to do at that stage of the journey is to understand, is this the right type of persona who has that pain point that my problem or solution solves to, or do I need to go build something adjacent to what I currently have to go solve for a problem because they've told me that they have this problem that I may be able to solve for? And it's really hard work. It's really hard work to do that.
Yeah. And it has to be super genuine because you're asking people to give you their time, right?
Yes.
But if you say, hey, we're a startup and here's what we're thinking, but we really need some input from people like you. I have one main question, and then if you'd like to expound, we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Just be really genuine about it. But it really works well. And I implore you all, if you're listening in your early stage startup, or if you're about to launch a new product and you need information, get introductions to people because then they're more likely to spend the time and answer the questions. And you have a whole network on LinkedIn. Use it. You have your whole network from growing up. You have your whole network from college. You have your whole network from all the jobs you used to have. And, everybody that you know. So tap into it and use it.
And if you need ideas for what questions to ask, it's so what we can model for Growth You. What I ask people is, hey, Alice, I love your, I love your podcasts and the thought leadership you're putting out there. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm on a new venture, and I'm curious what you're hearing startups say is their biggest challenge for growth.
Right. Super easy. And it's
so easy.
very authentic. Yeah.
Because that's what we sell for. That's what my company and I can sell for. So you just change that last piece and that's your initial script. But if you don't do that work to do that type of outreach, you're going to make assumptions on things that will or will not work. And it's
right. And choose people carefully. Like I said, get an introduction if you can, but
intros are the best.
Don't use one of those AI machines to find people and send them automated messages because it doesn't work.
Yeah.
They don't want 3 or 4 messages from you in a row, right?
Yeah.
You have to be authentic about it. And then when they respond to you, you need to respond to them.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think a lot of folks are afraid of doing sales because of I think they're afraid to hear no, actually. That's probably number one. But then you kind of get caught in this loop because you hear so much about automation and all these tools and stuff. The reality is that if you spend the time to craft a well-meaning message to somebody, they will likely respond.
Yes, 100%.
It gets harder as you move up market, obviously.
It does, 100%. But a well-crafted individual email, and even you may use some parts of the email over and over again, but
of course,
a well-crafted email to that individual, talking as a human to a human is going to make a difference. Now, let's go back to, you saw this, all these problems that need to be solved. You started up several companies yourself, and then you got to this point, you were doing the product stuff and take us back to the moment where you went, okay, I'm going to start this company and help startups.
Yeah, well, it wasn't quite that much of an aha moment, although I wish it was. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing, but so I had been doing all these mentorship calls and hearing all these pain points, and I had also
Where were you working at that time?
So
where
at
was
this
your
time,
job when you were mentoring all these people?
So I had been, it was Red Tricycle to Votion when I was living in the Bay Area, and I was doing a lot with different startup accelerators. And then I actually took a job as head of growth at Upside Business Travel, which was founded by the founders of Priceline, trying to tackle the business travel space. Sadly, the company did just go under. The pandemic really was a crusher for it. But it was an extremely well-run company, amazing team. And I mean, I learned more in 18 months there than I have at a lot of places in 2 or 3 years. So it was a really fast-paced environment. But what I had realized as an operator, where I had teams of people working on this stuff, was that every time I'm in a new situation or talking to a founder, there's really no standardization on how they're thinking about even understanding what is impacting their business that matters. And that goes, as high level as the metrics and as low level as the specific campaign or ad within a marketing channel. And I was doing a lot of work at this time. So now we're at 2017. While I was working at Upside, I was doing a lot of mentorship through the Growth Mentor platform. So if you check out growthmentor.com and you're a startup founder, or you just need guidance on a part of your business, you can sign up. It's a really cost-effective platform to use, and then you get free access to mentors like me. And I didn't monetize it. I was just, I did probably 250 calls on that platform and probably another 100 calls on other platforms over the last few years. And again, I just heard the same thing over and over and over again. So I remember the moment when I first started creating content for what became Growth University. And it was when I was still at Upside Travel running growth. And I was having a lot of these mentorship calls, and I would do a lot of them in the car because I had a really bad commute where I was sitting in traffic. I was sitting near DCA airport, sitting in traffic, trying to get into my job. And I realized, what if I just ask the same types of questions that I'm getting on all these hundreds of calls, but just ask it to myself and record the answer? So version 1 was I got out my cell phone and I asked myself a question like,
stuck in traffic, cell phone up. Okay, so how do you blah, blah, blah.
Really embarrassing, really embarrassing early start. And then I did that. I did that for a number of days and weeks. And then I transcribed all of that content. So I used a third party. I transcribed it. And that became a series of blog posts. And then the basics of what became like the first program that I created. So I started building this curriculum that I was going to try to teach back all of the themes that I had heard. Originally, it was actually going to be a book.
Full time.
I was working full time, mentoring,
recording while you're driving.
Yeah, got 2 little kids at home. It's just total chaos. But I had this desire to help startups. I had all this experience with startups, and I knew that in the next 2 to 3 years, I was going to be at an inflection point with my own career where I thought I could jump from being kind of the operator to being more of the educator on it, because I had all this experience and I'm constantly learning new things. And so that was kind of version 0.1. And then I was going to write a book. So I outlined this whole thing for a book, and then I just didn't have time I'm still working on the book. So the book, then the outline for the book though became the outline for the curriculum that I wrote. And then I finally got the first version out in 2019. 2018 actually. I put this really hacky pre-recorded course up on Teachable, or one of those platforms. And I had no audience. I mean, I launched basically to nobody, but I launched it. And over time, I grew the email list. I mean, I remember the first email campaign I sent out was to like 10 people. It was super embarrassing, right? But these are the things that you need to do as a founder to build that foundation that eventually, okay, now we're at some level of scale. But that was the nexus of it, was that those car rides, traffic.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great because you started putting it out there. I mean, you knew the problem existed because you had talked about it to many founders while you were mentoring them.
Yes.
So you knew what problems they were having. You started recording them, and you knew they were right on because you had already given those answers many times,
dozens and dozens of times. Yeah.
And then, you just went through this whole process. All right. So you were still working for Upside.
Yep.
And then, I mean,
then
just said to your wife, hey, I'm going to leave.
No, not yet, actually. So I knew I needed one more. I wanted more consumer experience under my belt, and I wanted an opportunity where my commute wasn't as bad. So I actually took a chief product officer role at Sandbox. So it was a much easier commute. It was a really fun company, and totally different market, totally different industry, different consumer. It was a consumer versus a business sale. I mean, Upside started as a consumer sale, but ended up as a B2B company, which was interesting. I helped us kind of through that process. But so I had one more stint where I thought I need a little bit more time to build this stuff out. I need something that's closer to home. And so Growth U, the second version, really became kind of a side hustle. And then I baked this curriculum while I was still at Sandbox, just doing it nights and weekends. And then I got invited to launch what was a live cohort. So it was originally it was built as a 6-week program where I had a lot of the content done, but I didn't have all of it done. And then Jason Calacanis and the Launch Accelerator asked me to run a private beta version for all the portfolio companies who they were saying were also struggling with a lot of these same themes. So when I got asked to do that, of course I said yes. And that was it was a small friendly audience. There were, I think, maybe 12 companies there, but I was literally building the content up until the moment I would hop on these live sessions, because I was delivering these as like a virtual live cohort. And so I didn't have everything baked, but the feedback on that program was really, really strong. And from there, then I had enough conviction and feedback on the early version. I knew where to make improvements. I knew where I kind of sucked along the way. I knew where the founders were really getting a lot of value. And then I spent a considerable amount of time. And at that point is when I needed to jump ship to do it. And then, it was conversation with my wife and, kind of position this in terms of a career move and how do we fund it. And luckily, we had a really fast start. I mean, the first version of the first public program, I mean, we sold out seats in like a day because we had so much demand for it. So, but then we switched business models. So, I mean, there's a whole bunch to dig into there, but that was
because you were live running these cohorts.
It was live. It was virtual. It was one program. It was one program.
Gotcha.
So there was
which was the first program?
It's now called Mastering Growth, but at the time it was just called Growth University, because I didn't know. I knew that this is what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what shape or form the future version of the company was going to take. I was just kind of letting the customers and feedback dictate where to go next. And it turns out after running so Mastering Growth is is it's a growth versus a marketing program. We don't really get into channel marketing. We get more into growth strategy. How do you think about growth for your startup? How do you measure things like retention and LTV and look at cohorts and build all the dashboards and all that stuff you need to know? But it's also, it was a single focus area. I mean, you get through that and it was like, okay, well, the founders actually had a lot more questions. So coming out of that, they were like, hey, what other content do you have? I need more help with paid acquisition, for example. So that was like, oh, wow, now this is interesting.
So you've got a captive audience and they're telling you what they need. How great
Literally
is that?
telling me what they needed.
And you're thinking, yeah, I can answer that question. Let me do that. So where did you decide to start recording it again? You know, like
it was
that, instead of running the live cohort.
Yeah. So I saw this was very much into the pandemic at this point, kind of I guess like first wave of the pandemic. I had seen, so I had talked to a bunch of our founders. So I'd put about maybe 80 or 100 companies through the first two cohorts of the first program, and then another 40 through the second course that we built, which we kind of pivoted away from that idea. So that course we're not doing anymore. But I had seen that people early in the first cohort were just dying to connect with people, even if it was virtually in a live environment. But some of the feedback I started getting the second time around was, hey, I love the content, but I want to just be able to do it after work or when my kids are in bed, or they didn't want to be on live. And that was a big commitment. And so then I started realizing I realized two things. One, the whole medium's going to shift. The whole industry is going to shift again, you know, where it used to be live in person, then live virtual, and there's a ton of demand. Now people want on demand. Yeah. And then also I don't have all the skills to build out the rest of this company. And at that point I started searching for, I didn't know it, but I was really searching for a co-founder. And from then on out, it was like build what the audience wanted, which was a mix of live and on demand content. So everything we do now has a recorded component to it. Even if we run it live, it's got a recorded component.
That's fantastic, because we all know as learners ourselves that we don't learn it the very first time we hear it, right? And we know from all the Harvard studies and every other study about the learning curve where, you know, we go up, we've learned it, and then we crash quickly and forget a lot of what we learned. So I think it's really important that people can review it by reading, review it by listening, review it by watching, and do it as many times as they need to us. So I think that's marvelous. And some people do need that in-person component or the live component with the recorded component. But I've always thought that, you know, this kind of thing needs to be done in every modality. Because maybe you're driving, you just want to listen, or you're running and you just want to listen.
Absolutely.
Maybe, you know, you can sit still and watch and take notes. Maybe you can read faster than you can listen, so you'd rather just read it and mark it up. Or maybe you need to ask a question live to somebody. So all those modalities included in Growth U is fantastic. So now you've got this company going, and you said really that earlier when we talked, this was your first real year. So tell us, you know, get us up to where you are now and how you're doing things. Actually, and I also want to hear, like, how did you get those first customers, right? I'm sure everybody wants to know, because that's something your startups you teach.
Absolutely.
You know, how did you get your first customers?
So I'll attack the first customers first. So we had an interesting scenario where, so I had run the first beta as a private beta for an investor and an accelerator. And then there was a lot of incentive to kind of roll this out into the public. So actually, he and I originally partnered up, and I was the trainer, educator, curriculum builder, and he provided the distribution for the early program. So, you know, Jason's like a huge influencer in the startup space. So put the feelers out, and we just drove a tremendous amount of demand. Now, but that was it. That was a one-time thing. We didn't want to be dependent on that. We didn't want to get used to that. We didn't want him to have that overhead to worry about. So that was like the foot in the door. I had also, for the last 2 to 3 years while I was building the curriculum, I'd been doing as much outreach as I could to make connections. And all of the founders whom I was talking to, were also leads for me, right? I could go back and kind of
because you had mentored them and they already knew that you had credibility, you had great answers, they knew they could depend on you.
So the first version for us was way different than how I would generally guide companies, or we were a little atypical from that standpoint because we had drove just a massive amount of demand out of the gates. But when we moved to a subscription model, so we had kind of worked through that whole backlog of folks that had signed up for the waitlist, but then we changed the model. We effectively stopped running the live cohorts. We built many new programs. It was a different pricing model. Now it's a subscription, not a one-time payment. And so all of that changed. And the way that we get customers now is through kind of four main channels. Paid acquisition. So we spend money on ads and we bring people in. So it's an inbound strategy. We do organic strategy. So thought leadership, being guests on podcasts, writing posts for Twitter, trying to engage people on social media, and an emphasis on search engine optimization. Again, an inbound process. Partnership strategy. So just like we built up original demand with our original partner with Jason and Launch and my own list and all that, we actively look for other go-to-market partners who are also talking to and working with founders that we can do some kind of trade on. Maybe we come in and do a speaking engagement or run a workshop in exchange. Maybe we do that for free, but on the end we drive a little bit of awareness for us, and we do that for other folks as well. And then the fourth is actually doing a lot of cold outreach. So it's the lightweight LinkedIn, not salesy approach, where I'm kind of constantly trying to connect with new founders to talk to them about their pain points. And I'm not selling anything, but the question often does come up like, hey, what do you actually do? And then we do a whole bunch of outbound email. And we've got plans when things kind of kick off more in person. We'll be at conferences and trade shows and things like that, but we haven't really gotten there yet. The health of the business is really strong.
Make sure you talk with me when you do that, because I'm going to give you some tips on the trade.
I know you were going through the whole process earlier, and there's so much that we don't yet know on that side, but we believe that that's probably where a lot of our potential customers are. And so, and we get customers from all four of those main channels. So we get customers from partnerships, we get customers from cold outreach and sales, we get customers from paid acquisition, and we get customers from organic. And it's fairly
there. This is super important. Yeah. So many people cannot clearly describe where they're getting their customers from. It is a big problem, whether you're a startup or whether you're 20 years old.
Yes.
You need to know how your customers found you. And because the customer journey is so different today, and it's so much more digital, you need to know whether they came in from a social media, organic type of strategy that you were doing, they found you, or whether it was a paid ad, or it was your channel partner, or, a trade show, whatever it was. And I think this is just something we need to pause on, because you've got to know where your business is coming from. You may be doing all that and then not knowing where they came in. So that's where the metrics come in that you were talking about earlier, and understanding how to measure where it comes from. So I think it's really fabulous that you've got that so well defined.
It's so key. Yeah. And every founder needs to get that tooling and instrumentation in place so that you can understand for every customer that you get in, worst case, you ask them, but you absolutely track that, because if you don't do that, then you're just guessing.
Oh, absolutely. You don't know, should we spend more money on paid ads?
Totally.
Or should we bump up the social? Should we work more with channels and stop doing paid ads, because channels are bringing 90%?
Absolutely.
Or it's referrals. The CEOs of these startups tell other CEOs,
100%.
and that's where most of our business comes from. Then why pay for ads? Right?
Totally.
So you have to know this so you can make really good decisions.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah. All right. So now that's where your business is coming in from today. So you started the company. You were looking for a co-founder, probably to do all of the back-end stuff, right? You knew how to put the curriculum together, but then how do you get this online when you change your model?
There's so much. I mean, there's that. There's also, I don't know all of the channels. I need somebody else who can be a partner in crime with me on building new curriculums and getting into the deeper channel marketing assessments. And This type of business, you need thought leaders, you need experts who have been in the weeds, doing the work, running marketing campaigns, running channel campaigns, running experiments. And so I found my co-founder, actually, I found because I was looking for somebody to just produce some short video content for me on how to create, back to tooling and instrumentation, how to set up and use Facebook pixels, because a lot of founders had questions on, they're spending all this money on Facebook, but they're not running great campaigns, or the ROI is going down. Well, it's because they don't have the right tracking in place and other things are happening. So I brought her on and was completely blown away by the content that she had put together. And she was in a spot where she could take the plunge with us. And then I just built the company up, basically finding the practitioners that we needed at the given time. So we do a lot of activation strategy and product-led growth. And so I needed somebody to kind of own that side of the business, to both teach it as well as do it for us. So again, practitioner and trainer at the same time. And then when we got a little bit more sophisticated, we realized we needed somebody who just had their head in the content and training and curriculums all day and getting that like one-to-one feedback from customers. Along the way, I needed a lot of help with the ops and support side of the business. I had actually brought somebody on who's now our head of operations. She was working with me even like really, really early, because the demand was really strong, but I couldn't do all of this stuff. Like I had to be in a spot where I had the curriculum ready, let alone like sending emails and calendar invites and reminders and Zoom sessions. And then we brought creative, resources in-house. And so it's been very organic in terms of how we've grown that team out. But that's what
being the CEO, we always wear a lot of hats, but when you're also the person who is developing the product, because it's curriculum,
absolutely.
Right? That makes it even harder because you have to do all of that and deliver, right?
Yes.
Now it sounds like you brought in some other experts.
Yes, we've handled that, but yes, I'm still very hands-on with it.
So you're selling, right? People are calling you and saying, I'd like to sign up. So really you just need people available to get them signed up. They may have a couple of questions, but
they might have some questions. Yep.
The selling's been done because of the website and the referrals and all of the other pieces.
We've got a free program that we get a lot of people into. So they get through the free program, and then we've got all the tooling in place to do the right types of activation to try to keep them engaged and active. So we try to let it do a lot of the work, but often it comes back to a conversation.
Sure. Well, humans need to talk to humans,
Don't
right?
they?
About that. But you only have one salesperson at your company, and that is you.
It is.
So it must be working that people do just go and sign up, which is fantastic. And I think everybody wishes that people would just come to their website and sign up. Now, of course, a lot of people listening have very complex, programs and products and services, and they are very, very expensive, and people aren't just going to click and buy, right? So we know that. But you have some more advanced programs that are more costly, and then people do need to talk to a human before they pay, right?
Yes.
So you're doing all the sales right now. What does that look like?
Yeah, so I will say that we've got a pretty good process down now. Our sales close rate is pretty strong because now we're qualifying people. Let me walk you back 6 months though. Over the summer, it was just pure chaos. I was on sometimes a dozen calls a day with very unqualified leads that we sent into the funnel that were able to get on the phone with me. And they've got a lot of growth questions, but no, they're not a fit at all. And it took multiple iterations of qualification or disqualification to really learn even what questions to ask on the intake form before they can book time with me. Because
so let's just stop there for a second again, because this is so important. We can drive traffic in, but is it the right traffic? And then someone's time, right, is going to be taken up talking to these people, whether in this case, it's the CEO, right? So this is really important stuff right now that we're talking about. Yeah.
I hear this from a lot of founders too, that they are really busy on sales calls. And then you ask them how many deals they close, and it's like 1 out of 50. They're not qualifying the potential buyer. So there really needs to be kind of two paths. Like it's really your job as a founder to protect your time fiercely. And I go back to the summer, and I think I was literally going nonstop every day. like no time between meetings, no time to take notes, not closing deals, and wondering, well, I'm talking to all these people. Why are sales not spiking over the summer?
Right.
Well, they didn't. The summer was actually the hardest part of our business so far. We still had positive growth every month, but it actually slowed down, and there was seasonality, but it was also, I was completely failing at sales. And I think founders are
right. And now you're thinking, am I a bad salesperson?
I'm thinking, am I bad? So I almost hired an SDR. I'm like, am I a bad salesperson? And I talked to one of my sales mentors, and I talked to somebody else, and they were both like, no, deal with it. You're going to be busy, but disqualify the bad fits. I was like, but I want to talk to her. Well, choose one. Either.
Yeah, but you're not mentoring now.
I'm not mentoring now.
And they need to pay.
That's right. That's right.
So it's completely different. If you were just
totally
going to mentor all day, that'd be fine. But that's not the purpose.
It was a tough lesson to learn. And so now we drive roughly the same amount of traffic, but folks have to fill out a 5-question survey before they can talk to me. And then I know exactly what we're talking about on that call now. And so the calls are actually fun. They're not stressful. We disqualify. But here's the interesting thing that keeps happening now. Our own leads that are taking our programs have this same problem. You know, they don't know how to disqualify. So now we're building some material for that. We've got some curriculum design that we're doing. So that's what's fun about this business is we can, oftentimes we're the ones feeling the pain. Right. We can solve for that, but also we're hearing the pain that other
physician heal thyself.
Something like that, exactly.
So you have the pain, and now you know that others are having the pain, and now you're going to fix the pain. Well, let's talk about this disqualification a little bit, because it sounds like you've got it dialed in. And before we wrap up today, I'm sure a lot of people would like to understand how you do that. Now, the simplest thing, and I heard you say it, is they have to fill out a form. If they're not even willing to do that, they don't get to be on the phone with the CEO or anybody for that matter, right? Yeah. Even if it's CEO to CEO, they need to understand what it is that the call is about, right? Yeah,
that's right. I think I look at this from a couple different angles. First of all, we've got some great product-led programs that are free. So you can sign up for a program called Fundamentals of Growth, or Growth 101 is what it used to be called. And you come in and it's self-directed learning, and you get a series of drip campaigns that drip you more content every day.
Nice.
At the end of that, if you've gotten through it, you get an invite to my calendar. Like, you can book time with me if you want. And if you've gone through the program, you're a great fit, because the stuff that's left out is the stuff that's taught in our more enterprise level versions. And that program is good enough that it's standalone. Maybe we're giving away too much value, actually. That's a conversation we're having internally, but I'm fine with it. On the other side, when we have a lead that comes in and hits our site and goes to try to book time with me, if they've already had the opportunity to go and self-select into a free program, and they've just decided not to. Maybe they didn't see it, but maybe they did, but they want to talk to a human. So I ask 5 questions. I ask, and these change often, and they'll probably change again, but in a nutshell, what I try to do is understand what type of business they are, who owns growth and marketing within their organization. And usually if they say it's me, I'm like, this is a great fit. If they're like, we have a marketing team of 100, I'm like, we're probably not there. That's not the ideal customer profile. How much money they spend on marketing. And if they say 0, but they're bootstrapped, generally that's okay. If they've raised money, but they're spending 0, then I'm wondering, I've already got questions in my head. And then I talk about what areas do they want to explore together? Fundamentals of growth, marketing channels, how to find customers. And so coming in, and those are just checkboxes, coming in, I have this whole list of things that I can cover with the founder. And within 5 minutes, we're having a great conversation.
This is wonderful. I love it. And I think it helps the person who's going to get on the call be prepared too. It's like, oh, this is what we're going to talk about. This is the way the conversation's going to go. And they appreciate that preparedness,
Yeah, it took some discipline for sure. And then the next gap that we're trying to fill right now is all the people that don't convert. How do we keep them engaged and warm? And again, I'm the salesperson, so it's just me. So temporarily, I've got 2 people from my team acting as sales development / value add folks in the mix, crafting video replies back, trying to get them to continue to engage with us so that we can continue to suss out whether or not it's a great fit.
For your growth, I would love to see you get a salesperson who believes what you believe and cares so much about these startups that they could be the one taking these initial calls and really helping figure out who is, going to buy and who isn't, so that you could just jump up above that, right? And be more looking at the bigger picture of how we continue to attract and retain these startup CEOs.
That's right.
I'm curious about the future for you as we wrap up here.
Yeah.
What do you see happening next to grow your sales organization? You've got all these wonderful mechanisms to bring all this inbound. You still need a live human.
We need a live human. Yeah. So we have we're going to hire at least one, probably two sales development reps and, or maybe an account exec who is kind of in a 50% sales role, but 50% in an exploration role with our members to understand what their future needs might be. And then bring that back into curriculum design. And then hopefully in 2023, we'll bring on somebody to lead the sales org. We've got headcount, we're hiring, we've got budget to hire.
If you're interested.
Yeah, we're hiring across the board. The other thing that's happening is a lot of the curriculums that we have built have a backbone that is right now in a lot of different spreadsheets. And when we build out growth dashboards and metrics dashboards for founders, we're actually productizing all of that. And so, earlier I walked through the onboarding process where we ask questions and there's some manual work that we do to kind of craft the thing that they get, that they're going to use every day to track their metrics and to track their own growth. That's a product. So that's actually going to be a standalone entity that is self-serve. You come in, you pay, you put your metrics in. And then if you want the human component, the mentorship or the programs, they supplement that product strategy. And so it all kind of fits together like a puzzle. But we're in the very early stages of prototyping that. So
this is so exciting.
We're really excited for 2023. I think it's going to be a good year. We've also moved all of our content to shorter form based on the needs of and the feedback from our audience. A year and a half ago, an hour-long session was great. Everybody was into it. Now it's like they're like, just give me the content in 3 minutes. So when we're re-recording our old programs, when we're building new programs, they're 3 to 10 minute chunks, and they're highly modularized. And our head of training and eventually a product will be able to kind of suss out what the member needs based on where they're at, and we'll feed them the content that is most relevant instead of having them have to go through the work of finding it. So there's lots of stuff going on.
Yeah, this is very exciting. Well, gosh, thank you so much for being on the show today. You have shared so many things that early stage CEOs or even companies who've been in business 20 years can grab onto. And especially, I love that you know exactly what drives your business, your sales, which you said there's 4 main things, that really drive that business into you. And I love that you're so specific about that. So
thank you.
Thanks for sharing all about how you built your company and how you built your sales organization. I'm going to be watching and I can't wait 2 years from now, 3 years from now to see how big you've grown and how many startups you've helped. I mean,
awesome.
This is good work.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this was super fun. I loved your questions, and I really like how you approach sales, and I really appreciate your time. And thanks for having me on. It was, I learned a lot on the call as well. So thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we will talk again because I'm going to want to know how you're doing. So
awesome.
Take care.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks for tuning in to Sales Talk for CEOs. You can find me at alicehyman.com. Be sure and connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know that you heard the show. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, write a review, and share the show with another CEO.